prize, please.
Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Ammar Ammar will defend the academic thesis enhancing the interoperability and reusability of nanosafety data, a foundation towards deeper insights and intelligent applications. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you, dear Prorector, dear members of the Corona, dear family, colleagues, and friends. Today I present the findings of my PhD thesis titled Enhancing the Interoperability and Reusability of Nanosafety Data, a Foundation Towards Deeper Insights and Intelligent Applications. In the beginning, let's define nanomaterials. So nanomaterials are substances engineered at the nanoscale. So they have at least one dimension with the scale of 1 to 100 nanometers. And to put that in comparison with something familiar, a nanomaterial is 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. And at that scale, at that tiny scale, nanomaterials express different characteristics and behave differently. So they can become stronger, more reactive, or even conduct electricity better. And therefore, nanomaterials are revolutionizing everything around us. So from medicine to energy and materials. They are used in food, in packaging, clothing, filtration systems, among others. A real-life example of nanomaterials is sunscreens. So usually sunscreens uses metal oxides to protect from UV light. And when nano-sized metal oxides like zinc oxide and titanium dioxide were introduced into sunscreens, they become transparent and more appealing. So it's the same chemical, but at different size and a different behavior and absorption and characteristics. However, there is a catch. So when materials become this small, it's hard to predict how they will interact with the human and the environment. So are they safe or not? And the nanosafety, or knowing the safety of nanomaterials is tricky because to ensure nanomaterials are safe, scientists need to understand the biological interaction between the nanomaterials and biological systems. And in order to do that, we need a lot of data on different aspects like the size, the shape, the behavior, and the exposure risks. This data is not easy to obtain. It's time and resource consuming, and it's often scattered, inconsistent, and incompatible. Therefore, regulators, industries, and researchers face a paradox. Like we innovate too fast, but we understand the safety of nanomaterials slowly. So we need a better system to turn nanosafety data into real-world insights. The current gap in nanosafety data can be characterized with a couple of points. So there are many standards and conventions to represent this data. The data is hard to combine and compare. There are many file formats, and they lack semantics and interlinking. So what does this PhD solve? In this PhD, I tackled that very gap I mentioned. So I focused on getting the maximum amount of knowledge from nanosafety data by aligning with the FAIR principles and community standards. I will explain those terms in the coming slides, but the goal was simple, is to help scientists, regulators, and AI systems to make sense of the data faster and smarter. It's about transforming chaos into clarity. So the FAIR principles are a set of principles to help make the data organized, shareable, and useful, so maximizing the value of the data for both people and computers. And it's an acronym of 4 words: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. By findable, simply it means others can find the data easily. Accessible, others can open the data, access it, or get it. Interoperable, the data is compatible with different tools and systems and other data. And reusable, where others can use the data and build on it. Each one of those principles have sub-principles under them to show the researchers how to make the data fair. I focused in my thesis on the I and the R, so the interoperability and reusability, and specifically making the data and the metadata linked and adhering to community standards. So in order, first thing, after knowing the FAIR principles, we need to know if our data, the current state of our data, if it's fair or not. So one part of my PhD thesis work was about evaluating fair assessment tools. So the FAIR principles were more of a guidelines. There were no technical implementation details on how to do that, which led to many tools in the scientific communities to be developed. We assessed these 10 tools for fair assessment, and we applied them on multiple data sets, and we found out that the metrics for fair assessment are inconsistent, sometimes confusing, and they are highly variable between the people who applies that assessment. So this part of my research shows that we need a better alignment across tools for fair assessment. We also came up in this study with a simple guideline or decision tree for both users and developers on how to select the best tool to fit their purposes. So for users, there were criteria like time investment, applicability, and improvement tips provided by the tool. And for developers, licensing information, extensibility, and maturity of the tool were given. The next concept, which is important in this thesis, is called minimum reporting standards. And those are a checklist of essential information that need to be reported in a study to make it comparable and reusable. Usually to make sure also the consistency and completeness across data sets. Usually this information also communicated as textual data or as textual information, and when lab researcher produces the data, they may follow the minimum reporting standards, but there is no link between those standards and the actual data. So when the data goes published or goes public, data users will not be able to understand what's in it and how to reuse it. So the part of my thesis, I worked on making minimum reporting standards machine readable, and also we can generate metadata for our data from those minimum reporting standards in an automated way. So when the data is published along with the metadata that adheres to minimum reporting standards, users can make sense of the data better and can decide for which application this data is reusable. To show you a simple example of how this transformation looked like. So when we go to one of the publications that provide a minimum reporting standards, we need to check where are those minimum reporting standards are communicated, why each variable to be reported is important to be reported, and then we convert this information into a machine-readable format. That's what you see on the right side of the screen, and this is what it is called maturity indicator, and this is what we can later assess if a data set is reusable based on the fulfillment of those maturity indicators. The results of this study, we ended up with harmonizing 12 minimum reporting standards from the nanosafety domain with 285 in total maturity indicators produced out of them. There is also a web application that allows you to automatically assess a data set for its reusability against 5 applications in the nanosafety domain. We also put this framework, nanosafety data reusability assessment, into practice. So we annotated 34 data sets using community standards, and then we integrated the data sets selected based on the assessment results, and then I built machine learning models to predict nanomaterials' effect on living cells. And we discovered with this research that we can obtain high-quality models, models that providing high accuracy by training them on multiple data sets integrated. But also there was a catch. So when we applied this model on a new data set, totally unseen, accuracy dropped. And that speaks a lot about the reproducibility in science and about the complexity of the way these nanomaterials are manufactured, how this experiment protocols are applied, and how the interaction with the cell, with the biological matter happens. Another aspect I worked on in my PhD thesis which is semantic data modeling for nanosafety. So data sets are all over the place, are scattered, inconsistent, as we said before. And when we have these data elements alone, they become like ingredients in food. And so there are a lot of ingredients, but we need to make sense out of them to have a recipe. And the data model is like that recipe. So, and the semantic part is adding meaning to that data, so we know how all these elements of the data fits together. So when different sources like labs, studies, and countries collect data in different formats, data hardly matches. And we need this data model to make sure to align all these data sets on a foundation or base model where we can make sense out of it. A simple example would be the name of nanomaterial. You can see on the left side there are several ways researchers express the name of titanium dioxide, but in order to make sure all these entities are deduplicated and disambiguated, we need to link them to a specific term that already defined and agreed upon by researchers. That's what you see on the right side with the number referring to the titanium dioxide, and that entity has also a title, a nanoparticle consisting of titanium dioxide. And we need to do that for every element and every part of the data. And then I ended up with a model that captures different aspects of nanomaterial safety, including the structure of nanomaterials, the quality of nanomaterials, different types of assays for toxicity, gene expression, and physiochemical characterization, and also the provenance of the data sets. So also, I applied this data model by converting several data sets into a knowledge graph and making them available for querying, so we can answer questions, complex questions, like find all the genes affected by titanium dioxide nanomaterials at a cytotoxic dose. That means we need two types of assays, cytotoxicity assay and gene expression assay, to answer this kind of questions. Other questions like what materials are linked to inflammation at low doses. Furthermore, to maximize the utility of all the work I've done with community standards and semantic data modeling, I integrated those tools and frameworks with other known databases in the nanosafety field. For example, the eNanoMapper, which is a toxicology data management solution for engineered nanomaterials, and also NanoCommons, which is it's a knowledge management solution built to store and organize nanosafety data. We also integrated the knowledge graph with AOP Wiki, which is Adverse Outcome Pathways resource, where we can link nanomaterial information to actual events that happens in the body that can lead to an adverse outcome. By this way, also, we make these tools available within other projects in the community, and we maximize their utility. To put this work in the bigger picture, the lack of fair data cost the European Union around 27 billion euro every year. And that's wasted time, duplicated research, and missed discoveries. Nanosafety data is one of those research fields, not all of them, but it is affected by this. And by making the nanosafety data fair, we save money, accelerate research, and reduce waste. This thesis provide transferable approaches and reusable solutions in other disciplines that are heavily relies on data can reuse and can apply. And by this way, giving back to the community to help eliminate the lack of fair data. I would also like to mention, since this work relies a lot on the community, that I contributed. I made all my the output of my thesis also given back to the community by making the code and the data sets open source, by converting data sets into machine-readable format, more than 90 data sets, and by participating in more than 20 conferences, symposiums, hackathons, workshops, and webinars where I disseminated my work, and I gave tutorials to help researchers learn, so apply FAIR in practice, so not just talking about it, but doing it. And yeah, these contributions will help lower the barrier of entry to the FAIR and the data verification, and will also help researchers use them. With this, I conclude my presentation about my PhD work, and I hope I could bring some clarity to the topic. Thank you for your attention, and I give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Dumontier, Distinguished Professor of Data Science Institute at this university. Professor Dumontier was the chair of the assessment committee, and he is the secretary of the degree committee.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I want to first take the opportunity to commend you on a very nice thesis from which I think all of us have learned quite a bit about this field and this area of research that you're investigating. I would like to extend my congratulations to the supervisory team and to the promoter, also for guiding you in this work. I would like to focus my interaction with you on two key parts. The first is about the FAIR evaluators and fairness assessment in general, and then the second part is about semantic data interoperability and FAIR by design. Okay. Okay, starting with the FAIR assessment tools. I guess the question is, what should these things do, in your opinion? What is the purpose of having some kind of assessment of fairness?
Yeah, highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. In my opinion, I think a FAIR assessment tool has mainly, the main objective of these tools should raise the awareness of FAIR data. They should provide information and to the users about what is FAIR, what every principle means, and how to implement them, and not focus on the scoring and giving an actual grade for your data set, which is what we see mostly with those data sets.
Okay, but then what is the purpose of FAIR in general? What is the stated ambition of the FAIR principles?
So the ambition is to make sure that this data is integratable and reusable, so enhancing its utility.
By whom? By people or by machines?
Well, it should be done by people, but for the machines also to make use.
That is right. In the original paper, the main vision for the FAIR principles is so that data become accessible and reusable by machines in particular. Should it not be the case that fairness assessment evaluators can run in an automated setting by machines to evaluate whether or not the FAIR principles are being met?
From the research I've conducted, it's turned out to be difficult to make an automated software that can cover all the types of data registries, repositories, and formats. So every automated evaluator makes a certain set of assumptions where to look for information on the global unique identifiers, licenses, usage policies, and so on. But not all the data are deposited in the same way on these resources.
Yeah, that is right. Does that not explain why there is such discrepancy in the evaluations that the tools are performing?
Absolutely. For the automated ones, this explains the variability. For the ones that are manual or questionnaire based, it's mainly, from what we've seen in the research, it's mainly about the interpretation of the people who use those questionnaires.
Yes.
So there's a human element for that discrepancy.
Yes, but when you look at the original FAIR evaluator, it was really focused on a generic set of qualities, let's say, that are present in the data descriptions or the data themselves, right? Yeah. But in your work, there is this focus on we need to do fairness assessment for specific kinds of data types. There is this tension then between generalizability and specific cases.
Yeah.
How do we address this issue?
That's true. So after assessing 10 FAIR assessment tools, we've seen that all the research or all the developers focus on the F and the A of these tools, and partly the I. The R are hardly even implemented or assessed. So because the reusability is community dependent or domain relevant. So every domain, they should come up with their own rules to assess if the data are usable for a specific community. And that's why I didn't want to repeat focusing on the general aspects, but I want to focus on a specific domain, the nanosafety, and to make sure that the data set is not reusable in general, but reusable for specific applications in nanosafety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have built yet another tool to do some kind of assessment. But I wonder, what would you do differently now? What have you learned from this experience?
Yeah, so indeed, it is a tool, but the way the metadata is expressed and the way it's communicated, we reused everything. We reused the WIB, we reused the schema.org vocabulary, which is widely used. We reused the maturity indicators framework by the original authors. So we didn't come up with our own vocabulary or framework for creating the maturity indicators. So all these components are open source and available, and we put together a way to do that assessment or do that matching between the minimum reporting standards and the metadata.
Yes, very good. Let us now pick up on this, right? The application of particular terminologies and vocabularies. You mentioned schema.org, and later on in your thesis, you also apply schema.org and a variety of other vocabularies in order to represent your knowledge graph.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, the question is, well, for an average person, how do you choose it? And how do we ensure that the product, the knowledge graph that is created, is in fact interoperable?
Yeah, indeed. So there are many choices for each one of those vocabularies to represent provenance, for example, or assay data. And I discussed in the paper the rationale behind choosing those vocabularies, either by their maturity or adoption or coverage of certain characteristics. And also, as much as possible, I try to make mappings between multiple types of multiple vocabularies in every part of the knowledge graph, so we make sure that these relationships are interoperable with other vocabularies.
But are they?
Well, to the extent in this knowledge graph, to the extent we could provide, yes, they are.
Interesting, but this is a far longer discussion, but I appreciate your answer. And perhaps one last question, if I may. A lot of the times we are indeed doing these assessments, we're finding, yeah, it's not so fair. What would you recommend to make fair data by design from the start? What would be your #1 recommendation so that we don't have to do integration and interoperability and all these things?
Well, I think, yeah, this is an interesting question. It's not about, I don't think there is a universal solution that should be adopted from the start to make everything aligned to a certain standard. So it's similar to languages. People didn't try to come up with universal language so all the planet can speak it. Instead, they focused on translations and making this people with different languages can interact with each other. So here we try, and every community is different and every country is different. What we need is to make sure we have this common ground of agreement on how to connect this data together and how to make it reusable as much as possible, and not focusing more on universal standard.
Interesting opinion. Dear candidate, thank you for your answers. I return the word to the prorector.
Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Labra, Professor Computer Science, Language and Systems at the University of Oviedo in Spain. Professor Labra was member of the assessment committee, and we highly appreciate your participation to this academic ceremony.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and also I want to congratulate the candidate for the PhD that I think it was very interesting. It was a lot of topics which are very interesting, not only fair, but also the creation of knowledge graphs, which are very close to the topic that I am working. So I have mainly 4 questions. Let's see how it manages depending on the time. So my first question is mainly about maintainability of knowledge graphs. I mean, it's very nice to create fair data, but that data we can create a static one, and we publish it in Zenodo, but usually the data is evolving, right? So we have to maintain the data, we have to keep updated. So the data, the knowledge graphs usually are dynamic. So I don't know if there is, what's their opinion or what are the possibilities that the knowledge graphs are maintained and they are sustainable. Some of the tools have the possibility to add data, to remove data that maybe was deprecated, or some data was obsolete or was wrong, and that you have to remove that. So what is the opinion on how to maintain the data that is fair? But okay, the first effort is to make it fair, but we also want to make it maintainable. So,
yeah.
So what is the opinion or the tools? Or
Okay, highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. So in this regard, I focused in the last chapter on creating a semantic data model rather than creating a knowledge graph. So the semantic data model ensures that you can integrate different types of assays or different types of modalities in the nanosafety domain, but it doesn't provide a universal knowledge graph that will be maintained by a central authority or central party. And that was deliberate because I thought instead of focusing on creating this huge knowledge graph and maintaining it, it's better to give the semantic model out to the community with reusable workflows for converting their data sets into RDF according to this model. And then this data, wherever they put it, it can be automatically loaded and integrated natively. So I don't think and I mentioned this also in one of the propositions, I think the idea is to spread the knowledge so people can, in this decentralized way, verify their data sets and make it available online. So it naturally integrates either through federated querying or by providing the files on Zenodo, and not relying on a central authority to create this knowledge graph and focusing on maintaining it.
okay, thank you. And that makes me switch the order of the questions, because the third question I was related with this was about the interoperability between knowledge graphs, right? And for that, I think the solution could be this semantic data model. But what do you think are the benefits of this semantic data model? Because maybe it's for documentation, do you see, for example, a future where you could generate the Sparkle queries based on that semantic data model? What do you think?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So when we have this semantic data model, we ensure that we can integrate multiple modalities. For nanosafety data, we can answer complex questions across multiple assays. And there are a lot of applications for these knowledge graphs. Generating a SPARQL query from the model is totally possible. So we have the model described in the RML language, and we have also a description of it using the shape expressions. So using that and with modern generative AI, we can utilize them for SPARQL query generation. But also it has the benefit of providing contextual information on nanomaterials, because it's very expressive and it contains the ontologies that explains the domain knowledge in there. So that's definitely serve as a foundation for generative AI.
Okay, thank you very much, because that relates with my second question that I switched, and now it's perfect for that, which is about the selection of technologies, right? Why you chose some technologies and maybe other technologies. And I have three questions here, three sub-questions. For example, you used shape expressions, yeah, but maybe you could have used Shackle or other technologies. So what do you think about that? You're also using RML, but there is also an alternative, which is you're using YARML, but there is SexML, which is more related with shape expressions. So maybe you can go ahead. And then there is a third one. But
yeah, okay. So for the choice of technologies, there are multiple factors. So with RML or YARML, which is an extension of top of RML, you can the mapping itself is written in a semantic format. So you can load the mapping into a knowledge graph, into triple store, and you can see what the rules that were applied. And also you can document all the steps of these mappings. It is possible to do that with programming languages and libraries, but then every language and every library needs a specific set of skills. But the YAML is based on a YAML, which is simple syntax that anybody can read, and the focus then will be on the mapping of terms to the ontologies and not on the technical stack of writing code and running it. For the second part on the validation, I used checks validation mainly because it's more compact and it's more human readable form for knowledge graph validation, which is, if you notice, I focused a lot on lowering the barrier of entry toward these technologies by making tools and frameworks that cut out a lot of the technical requirements before being able to use them. So it has a compact syntax and human readable. It supports recursion and nested shapes, and this is something I want to express in the model. We have like sort of inheritance between the entities, and also it works good with streaming. So you can run the shape validation, the shape validation on live knowledge graphs in a streaming way. We don't need to load the whole graph in memory.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's perfect answer for that. The third decision was about using basic semantic technologies like in RDF with Virtuoso or GraphDB. But there is another alternative that I know the research group is invested in, in wiki-based technologies, right? Wikidata or a wiki-base. Which one do you prefer? I mean, did you consider using a wiki-base instead of Virtuoso, for example?
Actually, I didn't explore that part in my research, but from my knowledge, I know Wikidata has already a model implied, and the model is wide. It covers different aspects or different fields. And in this work, I wanted to focus more on the NANOSAFETY with a specific data model. So I didn't explore using Wikibase. Yeah.
So that's no problem. And just, well, the final question is about something that I say in the latest months, I am very persuaded to work. It's not only to just publish open data and open knowledge graphs, but also to combine, especially in bioinformatics, to combine that with private data. So sometimes you want some part of the knowledge graph to be open, but some other parts not to be accessible by everyone or maybe by a selection of users. Did you consider that for, I mean, not for this thesis, but maybe for the future? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's totally possible, and this is one benefit of sharing the model instead of sharing the knowledge graph. So when you have the model open, even private sector or private data providers can make their data available in the same, according to the same model, and then it will natively connect with public sources. And then you can host this information locally and use the combined knowledge for querying. But if you mean like representing private data in a public way, that's like for privacy preserving, that's something I didn't explore in my thesis.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and I think those are, you answered very well all
Thank you very
my 4
much.
questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Cavill, Assistant Professor Advanced Computing Sciences at this university. Dr. Cavill was also member of the assessment committee.
Thank you, dear Prorector, dear candidate. This seat doesn't appear to have a microphone. Oh, thank you. I was going to move, but that's fine. Thank you very much for this thesis. It really builds the infrastructure for people to be able to do more. And that's a really important thing to do. I don't think anyone's disagreeing there. Within our faculties, you're in the Faculty of Health, Medicine and Life Science, I'm in the Faculty of Science and Engineering. We're generally trying to train scientists or perhaps engineers. So here we have a thesis which is building the infrastructure for science. Is that science? Are you a scientist?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know there is this the traditional view that this technical infrastructure or this infrastructure and thinking about verifying the data is like a technical afterthought that should be done after the real science is performed. But honestly, I find this view is a bit outdated. So today, especially in highly interdisciplinary field and data fragmented field like nanosafety, a downstream analysis is only as good as your data infrastructure can support. So this is not an optional thing or a support thing anymore. It is a fundamental part of the science to advance the field.
So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. So we also have many other machines, many other laboratory equipment that are absolutely vital to us producing science. Just like this infrastructure, I agree. Shouldn't be optional anymore. But generally, the maintenance, the acquisition of those things would not be done by scientists necessarily. Yeah. So does this need to be done by scientists? Where's the science here?
Yeah, exactly. So in order to combine data and integrate it and make it interoperable, we need to understand all the different elements of the nanomaterials, of the biological interactions, of the assays. And this is something should be done by scientists because it's driven by the questions asked by scientists to solve their specific problem or to hypothesize for new problems. So the models and the community standards is already made by scientists, and they're already published as research work. So yes, indeed, scientists should be doing the models and the tools to utilize minimum reporting standards. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one of your parents to read Proposition 8, please.
8.
As AI models consume existing public data, the next bottleneck will be the availability of high-quality structured data to enhance AI models.
Thank you. So, yeah, we've all experienced the pain of trying to build an AI model on unstructured data. And there's obviously two ways to go about this challenge. The first one is to structure the data, but we have a whole lot of unstructured data that's out there that no one will probably ever have time or money to structure. So isn't there another way of looking at this challenge, that we should be trying to develop new AI methods that can work on this existing unstructured data and can fully utilize the information that we already have?
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. What I think is that there's already AI models like large language models and generative models. It's already utilize unstructured data. They are trained on the whole text, images, videos ever produced by the human race. So they are capable of doing that, but even with all the knowledge that have been consumed, it's still they're not able to reason or to solve a certain type of questions. And this is where, yes, we already utilized this unstructured data, but it has been shown that it's not enough to learn to the point where we can answer more complex questions. And the research has shown also that if we guide those large language models or generative models with contextual data, so limiting the space where they can find the answers from, this will definitely enhance their accuracy and the structure of their answers. So this is why it's part of the title. It's a foundation for intelligent applications, because knowledge graph can definitely be a guide for AI models to answer questions in more structured way and a smarter way.
So you're envisaging a future where the large language models can work with the existing unstructured data, but being guided by the structure of some structured data within the knowledge graph?
Absolutely, yes. This is where I see the future going. Yes.
And how do we get there?
So the first, every branch of science, every discipline need to provide this structured data, and this is where when we have the semantic data models and we have our data verified and available in these knowledge graph formats, we make this structured knowledge available for large language models or for AI systems in general. Yes, and this is where we need also to work more on the bridging between the two. There is continuous work on utilizing knowledge graph as a context for large language models, but we also need to focus on that.
And then we all agree, and I think every scientist I've ever spoken to agrees that fair data would be great. But yet it still hasn't happened. And you've talked about how you've done workshops and been at conferences and hackathons and webinars, and you've tried to lower the bar. What's the biggest impedance? What stops people from making their data fair at the moment? Why aren't we all doing it already?
Yeah, so fair is something, as I said, can be perceived differently by people. There is a cultural way of thinking what fair is, and this is so you can achieve certain level of fairness without going into the technical depths of the implementations I'm sharing with this thesis. But if we want to reach the level where we have highly structured and machine-readable data, we need more technical knowledge. There is a lot of interdisciplinary skills need to be acquired from the semantic web part, from the technology part, from the data science, the AI, and not all the fields, all the researchers in these fields are equipped with this knowledge. So I think the first, so it's important to spread this knowledge. It will be limited for sure. It's not going to be easily applicable in every field. It's more easily applicable in computer, where computer and data are part of the fields, but not when they are totally away from it. Yeah, by spreading the knowledge and being more engaging with other fields, make them more interdisciplinary, we can be there, reach that point.
Thank you, candidate, for your answers. I'll pass the word back to the prorector.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Smolinska, Assistant Professor Pharmacology and Toxicology at this university. Dr. Smolinska was also member of the assessment committee.
Thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, congratulations for this amazing thesis. Congratulations, of course, goes to you, but also to your supervisor. For me, it was really a great lecture, if I can call it that way, and a way to learn really what the FAIR principles is and why is it so important. So I will start with the first question, which a bit continues what Dr. Kavin asked you at the end. So your thesis focused so much on the FAIR principles. We have the 4 parts. You focus mostly on 2. But I would like to have a bit of discussion with you is which of them is the most neglected in the nanosafety data, but maybe, and of course, why? And also if we can a bit extend it to other fields, because as we know, FAIR is very important everywhere.
If I understand correctly, you're asking why I focused on the I and the R and not on the F and A parts of the FAIR, right?
Yeah, but also, sorry, I heard the echo. Yes, why you focus on those 2 parts, but also if you could extend it to other fields and which one of those 4 are mostly neglected. Maybe all of them, but I would just like to hear your opinion.
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Indeed, so when we looked into all the tools that we could find that perform fair assessment, we found a lot of focus on the findability and accessibility. And those are probably because they are the two most easiest to achieve. So accessibility can be achieved by putting things on the web mainly, providing access, and findability is a bit harder, but it requires having identifiers with metadata. So those are, a lot of work has been done there, and there are many repositories and institutional repositories, registries where you can make this data available and adherent to the findability and the F and the A of the FAIR principles. However, it wasn't the case for interoperability and reusability. And there are reasons for that. So the way that, so every field of science has different requirements for data to be reusable. They have different community standards and different models. So it was hard to come up with universal guidelines for every field to make their data reusable according to their field, to their field. And this is why I believe this was the R was the most neglected one because of this obstacle. Every community and every domain need to define what is it meant of data to be reusable in that field. Interoperability also harder because it requires interaction with computer systems, with ontologies, with automated agents, and every field depending on their technical engagement. So it would be either easier or harder for them to achieve that. So I would order them. R is the most neglected, I then, and the F and A are the most applied, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we often find the data, but then we really don't know what it is exactly, right? A bunch of numbers that corresponds to often to something, and the something is not properly defined. Okay, so that leads me to another question. So you emphasize also the ontology alignment is key in your thesis. But how did you ensure that the ontologies reused from the different sources remain semantically valid and interpretable across research, industry, but also regulation? So for me, you mentioned that, okay, it is important, but what about kind of like a validation protocol for this? If you could comment on that.
For this, so I took the community as a central part into this. So we know I was part already of 2 EU projects working on nanomaterial risk assessment and knowledge infrastructures. And I wanted to make this work aligned with the current solutions available in the European projects. So yeah, it would be very broad if you want to align every ontology with everything existing there. But I said, okay, let's see what are the most leading solutions in the field and let's align to them. So for example, the choice of the bioassay ontology to model assay data was coming from that the 2 main solutions in the field, which are the Ambit software, eNanoMapper, and the NanoCommons, are using that ontology to represent their assay data. So yeah, we can argue that other ontologies could be a bit more expressive with certain types of assays, but it was an easier choice in this case because I want to make this semantic data model already interoperable with the community, with big part of the community at least. And whenever possible, where we can make connections to other ontologies or reusing relationships from other ontologies, it was, I adopted that. But there is I didn't do any automated validation or systematic validation to ensure, that mapping is applicable.
Because of time, I believe we have to move forward to the next opponent, and that will be Professor Toen, Professor Bioinformatics at the Radboud University in the Netherlands. And we thank you also for your participation to this academic.
Dear candidate, congratulations on the delivery of this outstanding opus. It has been a pleasure to read a thesis from you as a fellow FAIR expert, semantic web enthusiast, open science supporter, and perhaps also a partner in crime. My questions focus on chapter 8, in which you give a nice example of where verification really helped integration of different resources. And you put a lot of effort in making all these resources fair. But I'm also looking for examples where other people have made data fair and where me as a researcher just can link to it. We did this, for example, with Wiki Pathways, and a fair resource from Maastricht, and there is a nice Nijmegen-Maastricht connection, so we can use each other's data, which is great. But the whole rest of the world seems to be a little bit less fair, as I would say. So in chapter 8, for example, you demonstrate federated analysis with resources that you reference, but also in those resources you were involved in the verification, or at least in defining the interoperability schemes. So can you also give me an example outside Maastricht and Nijmegen of a resource where you could, in your research, easily connect to because they were fair?
Okay, so dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. The integrations I've done for federated querying, indeed, it was with the AOP wiki. I didn't do or I didn't verify or create the AOP wiki, but it was one of my colleagues at the department was involved in it. The NanoCommons knowledge base is an example where I wasn't involved in there, but we had communication with the technical staff at that company, which is Biomax, and we need to know what vocabularies are using or what ontologies are using, so we can make sure that the interoperability can work. So we needed human communication in there, agreeing on the model, or because we share the same ontology, so that was easy, and then we could write the Sparkle queries that can interoperate with data. So it is still needed to have this model shared and communicated between different parties, or at least part of it, to make the data interoperable with other parts who were not involved in this. So this is why also it was important to share the model itself and not only the knowledge graph, because I know with semantic semantic knowledge graphs, it's hard to extract the schema in a meaningful way from the knowledge graph, and this is why providing the model is a very helpful guide to write queries and achieve interoperability.
Sure, and I think, in practice this is still difficult. So, for example, you mentioned the bioassay ontology. We use the experimental factor ontology. Yeah. Other people there seem to be even different camps use CDISC. Yeah. So, how are we going to ever solve this?
Yeah, I think it will always be. You will always have new projects coming and new ontologies being developed. I don't see a point where we will have a single ontology to rule them all, but I think we need focus more as much as possible or aligning the ontologies themselves. So we talk here about aligning the data toward the model, but also we need to make these mappings or interoperability between the ontologies. So this is something should be done by domain experts that should be heavily involved. And there is already connections between the OB ontology and bioassay ontology and the IFO. But yeah, the maintenance of that and keeping those mappings up to date is a lot of work.
Well, yeah, it's indeed a challenge ahead of us. Is there time for a short question? Sure. So I'd like to have some advice on the verification of omics data. That's my. So you did some of that work on page 203. You describe actually how you converted different data sets into RDF. But there is little information on gene expression data. You further show in figure 8.3 the schema, etc. But we took a little bit of a different approach. How we kept really the omics data in a community standard flat text format, and described the exact format in semantic way, and using a semantic schema, and could also query that without converting it to a knowledge graph, which may have certain advantages. Have you given that some thought as well, and what would your final advice be? For this part, I think this is also something I mentioned. It's very important to have high quality data that is
captured in the same way, or at least we know that it's following the same experimental protocol or procedure. The omics dataset, the gene expression datasets were recommended by the community of NANOSAFETY project, and all of them were pre-analyzed with the same standardized operating procedure. That means we have all the text files we got went through the same pipeline of analysis, so all these values are comparable and interoperable. So yes, I did the conversion into RDF, but I didn't, it's coming from Geo originally, so I didn't explore making them in a semantic format and then querying them like in memory without the need of converting them to semantic format. Is that what you're implying here? Yeah. Well, because we're also integrating other types of data into the knowledge graph, so the point is to make data fair for later reuse, so make them available online in that RDF format, so we stayed focused on that goal.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
The opposition will be continued now by Professor De Kok, Professor Translational Genomics at this university.
Thank you. Dear candidate, congratulations on your wonderful thesis, I have to admit that, on a relevant topic in the nanomaterial field and potentially beyond that. And I also extend my congratulations to your supervisory team. And having said that, I would like to go into, to expand on that impact part with you and have some discussion on that. Because already in paragraph 1.5, you indicate that the context of nanosafety, where the data is collected from various sources, is very heterogeneous. Ensuring data quality becomes even more complex, and your conclusion is that there's a need to establish common practices. And further on, somewhere else, I read an additional argument that the data are from industry partially, which makes them even more difficult to get access to. And I was thinking, well, if I look at clinical data, they come from different sources, they are very heterogeneous, they may be very difficult to access because there's patient data. And for pharma, actually, the same applies. Basically, it applies to everything. So in the clinic, we refer to that as good clinical practice. So my question is the nano field, and actually any other field of science, not in demand of good non-clinical practice? And after having a discussion very shortly yesterday with your supervisor, Dr. Wilghagen, he was asking me, are you going to comment on the thesis title? And I thought, no, it's a perfect title. But nevertheless, based on that, I suggest to change your title into the Fair Manual of Non-Clinical Good Practice. And can you reflect on that?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. I totally agree. So, good non-technical practices are also needed. So, what has been done in this work is extensible. So it's true we focused on community standards, but these tools and approaches are also applicable to other things like good manufacturing practice and good clinical practice. So yes, we need in the field more common practices to ensure data quality, but in the nano field it's even more complex than that, because there is a lot of heterogeneity in manufacturing the engineered nanomaterials, and in the way they are the process of manufacturing and the way of assessment using different assays and different experimental protocols.
Can you specify that a little bit? Because actually that was my next question. Is there anything specifically in the nano field that you would think that would make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So in chemistry, usually a chemical has like universal structure or universal composition, but in engineered nanomaterials, it's batch-to-batch variance is always common. You cannot reproduce the same batch of nanomaterials, exact batch of nanomaterials. That's why every material coming out of the manufacturer is unique on its own, because those particles have different sizes and different,
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to go on to chapter 6. where you apply the framework you described in chapter 4 to predict cell viability, as an example. And why cell viability and not because that's a very generic endpoint? Why not something that's more specifically related to nanoparticles, like radical generating capacity or something? And your presentation triggered the additional question: is that maybe the reason why unseen data are less produce less accuracy in that prediction? Maybe you just took the wrong endpoint.
Yeah, indeed. So when we explored the data sets and we applied reusability assessment and we wanted to integrate them, we found that there were many types of assays involved and not many data sets share the same assay. It was the cell viability, the one that had the most number of data sets that we can integrate together. That was the main reason for choosing cell viability. Because of this diversity in assay types, you may have 1 or 2 data sets from the 34 that uses a specific assay. So the integration...
Yeah, I understand. So that's a very practical reason. Do you think if you would have had something more specific, that also the predictions would have improved for unseen data?
Yeah, it is hard to tell from, we explored different things to see why this data was variable. So it could be when you combine the data sets, you only select the overlapping variables in there, and there were not many of them. And we have very different types of nanomaterials with a lot of experimental conditions that could affect that predictability. So we could be missing information in there. But it's definitely, we would try another types of assays.
Ammar, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return to this room.
All right.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. Better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. What's on the line? I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Ammar Ammar. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense in view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications. The degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Evelo is authorized to confirm upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Dear Ammar, before we continue, I have to ask you a formal question. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
I promise.
Then, by the authority vested in us by law, and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Ammar Ammar, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. And we checked it didn't melt yet.
Thank you.
Please be seated.
Dr. Ammar Ammar, congratulations.
Thank you.
Did wonderful, I think. I'm just going to share a few words with you because Egon, your daily supervisor, who did most of the work anyway, will say most of the things. But I really want to congratulate you. I saw that you promised to be independent just now, and I was like, that guy really doesn't have to promise to be independent. That is what you showed all the time, right? I also noticed that there's another reason more important in life to be congratulated with, and that is that your family extended just a week ago, I heard.
Yeah, indeed.
I thought you were good at planning. But that really is more important, and my congratulations to that, to you and your family for that and this special occasion too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we give the word to Egon Willy.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Dear Dr. Ammar, dear Ammar, first for me as well, congratulations and thank you, and I will get to that in a moment. I'm going to say a couple of words. I very much extend that, that's the first thing that I wanted to mention, your independence, and that is sort of how we met. During your master, you came up to me and you said you wanted to do an internship. That's how our collaboration started, and that was a very unexpected exercise, if you like, because normally an internship and in FSE, the Faculty of Science and Engineering, it's a bit different. You write a project proposal and you do your internship based on that. But you came to me with a full project proposal that wasn't just an internship proposal, but could have been a proposal for a grant, actually. It was really very well worked out, and I just had to listen. I didn't have to do anything. I think we had good discussions. We definitely tweaked things. In the end, it was a wonderful piece of work that did not end up in your thesis. So your PhD thesis actually was about something else, and I'm really happy that you accepted my offer to continue your scientific research in our team. And that was about a very difficult question of nanosafety. We've seen a lot of discussion about that already. But the interesting about this field actually is it is very interdisciplinary, and one discipline that we actually do not have expertise here in this audience, but turns out to be an important part is psychology and sociology. Because the adoption of FAIR, the choice of solutions, that very much depends on how we interact together as a scientific community. So that is definitely something that I want to commend you about as well, because you did that really well. And you mentioned the interactions and the dissemination at different conferences, but you really showed how to do that. And that is also reflected, for example, at some point with the eScience Fellowship that you decided to do and got. So a lot of really interesting work done there at a very difficult interface between, well, not two, but actually multiple disciplines. I also like to comment on something else, because you're a very kind person, a very patient, for example, and it actually takes some effort in getting you to show your enthusiasm, because by default you give a very factually correct, insightful answer. But seeing that spark, and I've been in the position to see that spark a lot of times, and in the deliberation after the presentation, after the defense, we also discussed that a bit. We saw that also in how you answered the questions here during this defense. And with that, I congratulate the opposition with asking questions that allowed you to show some of that enthusiasm here and there, still a bit reluctantly. But thank you for that. I mentioned the team science already. So at the end of the PhD, and your PhD contract ended about a year ago, I was a bit surprised that you would not continue in science, because you have definitely the skills for that, demonstrated here in this defense, of course. But here too, you show an interesting independence, and you had a very clear idea of where you wanted to move next and why. And that is also something I think that really exemplifies your uniqueness in all this that I appreciate so much. I think I'll wrap up with this, and you know, and you mentioned on that your research, we tackled, I think, a couple of questions, and you worked out some really interesting proposals to the community on how to move forward. And I particularly like, for example, the story about the community standards, how we need to integrate it and how we can integrate that to actually integrate that more social aspects of this, which community standards are, after all, and how to link that from the knowledge, the biological experiments, the research in the wet lab, if you like, to the AI in the end. But now it comes down to getting all this used. So I also really very much appreciate how you focus on the impact, and with the continuation of this research line in the group, we're building on top of this. But what I want to conclude with there is that I don't think we're done reading your thesis for the next 2 years. There is so much there that we want to explore further and see how far we can push things. You've given me a lot of material to continue working with. With that, I'm really so happy that you were part of my team. Really disappointed that you didn't want to continue in my team. Not that I would have funding at the time, but that's another thing. Thank you so much for, in total, more than 5 years of collaboration. And I wish you and your family and your future colleagues a lot of joy in this complex field of research.
Thank you so much, Egon. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
dear Dr. Ammar, also on behalf of the Board of Deans of the Maastricht University, it's a pleasure and honor for me to congratulate you with this new degree of doctor. The university wish you all the best in your future career, but at this time, I believe you have to prioritize, and that's an advice, your fathership. Congratulations also with that. Hereby, I will close this academic ceremony. Before congratulating the new doctor, we will take a picture here in the aula, and after that, we will also have a picture on the stairs in the central hall. Hereby, I close this academic ceremony.
Thank you. Can I bring this?